All right. Good afternoon, everyone. Hope you're having a nice, restful Saturday. Weather's perfect spring day here in the Cape. I think that we are having an interesting time at the moment because with the recent leaking of the Kanamea video from 2 weeks ago, we've since been able to come in contact with a number of people from Stellenbosch municipality, both councillors and staff and businessmen. And we've started to get a certain picture of what looks to be some captured municipality. So recently, the man, I think it was yesterday, he resigned. Kanamea resigned ahead of the council meeting that would have passed judgment on his misconduct. Now, this is not unusual. What you'll notice a lot of the time in DA municipalities is that they will, once there's a media scandal, they will vote to have some kind of disciplinary or investigative process, and the person in question will resign before they can be exposed to the scrutiny, and usually be bounced to somewhere else where they're looked after so that they don't start talking. Now, in Stellenbosch, they've had a much tighter ship up until now. So what I've managed to gather from talking to various people is that they have absolutely no political oversight. The DA has no control over what's happening in the municipality. It's run entirely outside of their control. So part of the thing about that is it's embarrassing. So they actually protect this process by forcing their councillors to vote on things that are not necessarily good ideas, because they don't want to rock the boat and make it appear that they don't have control over Stellenbosch. Now, Stellenbosch is still reasonably well run, and the usual things that one would expect from, let's say, an ANC municipality, this is for sure. We know Stellenbosch also has a lot of money to spaff around. And the other thing that we all know about Stellenbosch is that it's, the private interests are very, very moneyed. They're very wealthy interests, and some of the biggest and most powerful people in the country have property there or businesses there, resorts, wine farms, golf courses, what have you. So now the picture that's sort of generally emerging here is that this crowd of people, many of whom are DA donors, have a rather cozy relationship with the municipal staff, particularly with people who have control over planning. Now, specifics are things that I'm not going to get into right now. I've got to get all my ducks in a row before I make specific allegations. But broadly speaking, this sees to be the pattern. Now, the things that I can say specifically so far are that the Geraldine Mettler is the municipal manager, and then the director of corporate services, who was previously Annelien de Beer. What's the case there is that they have a protocol internally where no councillor has any access to information or staff unless it's supervised or controlled by these two. And councillors who try and go into the municipal buildings have to pre-arrange a meeting. And if they enter, they are subject to 2 security checks, 2 permission checks, and they will be shadowed either by security or by the municipal manager or director of corporate services. So you have 2 people who have complete control over the flow of information in and out of the municipality, and there's no insight. Now, I asked Annelien de Beer over the phone directly, has she ever denied information to any councillor for any reason? And she insisted that she could not recall whether or not this was the case. That's not a good look. So, look, yeah, and so what I got, and I mean, I'll be publishing what I'm saying here in just after the stream is done. So, the thing is that they went through many steps to silo information inside the municipality. So you've got a situation where, even different departments inside the municipality don't really have access to what's happening. So until 2018, 2019, they had a platform called Collaborator. And Collaborator would store in an open and easily accessible way all the meetings and briefs and information that they would need to know what was going on in their municipality, keep abreast of their colleagues' work, see what was going on. Now, this was removed and access was restricted to only upper management in around that time. There was also big layoffs around this time of a large number of people, several of whom have been kept on the payroll because they weren't actually fired. They were given indefinite suspensions, and then they were made to sign disclosure agreements. So there's a large amount of that. There are a lot of disgruntled employees. Some of them are actually not just afraid of the non-disclosure agreements. One of them whom I spoke to was so terrified that when she heard that I'm living, in Drakenstein, they got frightened that meeting me in person might result in, them getting killed. Some of these people have become so paranoid. Many of them have had their phones tapped in the past and are understandably afraid of talking over the phone. And this is not just people who are in the municipality. It's also, people in the local civic society, local businessmen. People are generally quite afraid of the consequences of talking about the nature of corruption in Stellenbosch. Most tangible cases that I'm coming up against are related to planning processes. And this is a situation where a lot of farmers are being prevented from developing their farms because, well, if their competitors don't want them to develop, So we're having that. It's not just that. I mean, there's also different kinds of developments, and a lot of the characters that the former mayor Gessie van Deventer carried in were employed under her in Drakenstein when she was mayor over here, and she was parachuted into the mayoralty not after having served previously. She was pushed straight into the mayor's position, selected straight out of there, and this tends to be the case. There's very few people who are selected to be brought up. Now, I was speaking to a local activist who I know, who was around during the time that she was pushed out in 2016. This was apparently related to some scandal involving inappropriate hiring processes. Specifics remain to be determined fully, but apparently it was something related to that. Now, I covered issues related to the what's it called, the waste to energy plant, which severely overpriced by a factor of 6. Also, crooked environmental impact assessments, easily torn apart by ordinary members of the public, and the municipality was forced to promise they would never put this into place, and then on the same day they went up to the national government. And I now hear rumors that even the president has a stake in this somehow, but I'm not sure I trust that remark. People, until I can verify these things, the problem when you're doing these interviews is you get a lot of things you need to double and triple check because everyone's got some rumor they're operating off. But yeah, so Gessie van Deventer gets kicked out in 2016. The reason given is that apparently, and according to the person who was head of the caucus at the time, she could not be controlled by the party, and so they're going to move her on.
The party and being the DA.
The DA.
Yeah. Yes.
So what happened is that she moves out and she takes all of her people with her. There's like a whole cluster of them. There's like 6 or 7 I've been able to identify so far. And they all moved over from Drakenstein into Stellenbosch, right? And then they remain this cluster that controls. And they're still there, even though Gessie has been removed and replaced by Mayor Vasser. By all accounts, Mayor Vasser is a very good public speaker, and he knows his constituency very well. However, he, by all accounts, he does not understand the processes and finances or anything like that. And so he's easily sort of pushed around. Okay. So again, this is what happened: is they replaced Gessie with someone they thought they could control, a lower level councillor called Conrad Poel. Now, Conrad Poel got caught in his own corruption scandal, and what the DA did to get rid of him, I think it was last year, they collaborated with their opposition in council in secret to have him removed before he could face a disciplinary hearing.
Interesting.
And a friend of mine actually quit the Vryheidsfront Plus over this because they collaborated. So
Yes.
wants to see justice done. But the problem over here is one of a very, very consistent pattern of complete lack of accountability. And it's only when you out them in the press that they do something about these people. Now, of course, there's nothing we can say about this that is going to, argue that the ANC are objectively worse. They're the enemy. We don't even think about them. The DA should be doing better, especially because what right now is Helen Zille's going into Johannesburg, which is an absolutely poisoned municipality.
Yes.
And they have to clear out tons and tons of corrupt cadres that are embedded there. Now, what happened when they took over Tshwane, they didn't do this. They didn't do this in Nelson Mandela Bay either. They were supposed to purge the municipality. But what happened is on the very first day they get in power, one of the first things they did in Tshwane was they handed these cadres 10-year contracts as a sort of olive branch to sort of smooth things over. It was a very bad move.
And if you look at what happened to Pretoria, with Cille, what's his name? Cille's Brink. Yeah,
look, I like Cille's Brink. I think he's a good guy, and by all accounts, he's actually a pretty straight shooter. But I think the thing is that the party is the party, and Cille's Brink doesn't have complete autonomy. And so the kind of strategies he's allowed to float at that level will not be entirely under his control.
Exactly.
So, yeah.
And so your thoughts are when Helen Zille, if she makes it to be the mayor of Johannesburg, is she going to purge these people? Like, will she even be able to?
Yeah, that's the question.
And what kind of skullduggery?
Well, I mean, it's an interesting thing because that question has been posed to. I don't think she's going to get up to. Look, most of the skullduggery that she gets up to, from what I understand, and the thing is, I've found that she and Alan Winde and Anton Bradell and Jordan Hilders have all been aware of various stories of corruption that have happened around the Western Cape. And here in Stellenbosch is no different. There's at least one story that I know of that all four of those individuals have been advised on in detail, right? And one of the things is that they never do anything about corruption. Never, ever, 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 ever. There's no case of them ever dealing with corruption until police arrest somebody or a scandal gets out of hand. Okay? Yeah. And then they do the bare minimum possible to contain the scandal. That's always the case.
If you go onto their website, zero corruption. So they put themselves forward as this kind of morally superior party. That's all their branding. It's so yeah.
No, that's for sure. That's true. My point over here is actually a bit more subtle because look, I think it would be silly for anyone to argue that the DA don't do at least a halfway decent job, right? They're not a catastrophe. They really aren't. They actually do deliver basic services, right? But part of the problem here is that they've got some bad strategies, they've got some bad practices. And look, in the Western Cape, where the ANC was not in charge long enough to really cause deep, lasting, permanent damage. Okay? But the thing about the DA is that when they go into government elsewhere in the rest of the country, where the DA has been governing, the ANC has been governing for 30 years unchallenged, right? They're now going to be facing such extraordinarily deep rot that their chances of really affecting meaningful change rely on their willpower to do things that haven't been done before. And on your question, on the question of purging cadres, this was actually directly put to Helen Zille fairly recently. I think it was a year or two ago, right? And they asked her directly, will you be getting rid of ANC cadres in the metros that you win? And she says, absolutely not. We don't do cadre deployment. That's this should be absolutely a non-political appointment environment. And I sort of think to myself, well, look, that sounds noble, but this is politics. And who is in charge matters a great deal. You can't simply, defer to impersonal principles. At the end of the day, it's results that matter. And the health of institutions relies on the quality of people that you employ. and it's very difficult to believe that they have the strength of will required to keep things above board when this sort of stuff is happening. So, yeah, I don't have a lot of confidence. I think, look, here's the thing. I think it's a good thing that Helen Zille is running. I think it would be a good thing for the DA to run Johannesburg. That's unequivocal. I don't think anyone can debate this. I think that's obvious. But whether they'll be able to fix Johannesburg, that's a separate question.
Oh, sure. Do you know, are you aware when it comes to passing bylaws? I mean, we know that since the DA have had a super majority here in the Cape, they actually haven't passed many bylaws. What, like 2 or 3? I mean, not that many. Do you think that?
Well, it depends. It depends. I mean, like they did a lot in Drakenstein under Geesie van Deventer, some of which I quite disagree on, but that's a whole boring nest of bollocks. But yeah, your broader point, I think is quite holds some water. Yeah.
Yeah, like I suppose it depends what bylaws you pass. Yes, but do you think that the passing of more bylaws, empowering municipalities to root out corruption, is a way forward there?
I think the thing is, look, the national legislation still is the reigning still the reigning instrument. Municipal Systems Act and so on. These acts are where it comes from, and there's not much you can change at a local level. The thing is that local politics is powerful because it shapes the local economy. You decide who can build, who can run a business. You can decide who lives and dies in the economy, right?
Yes.
To an enormous extent. I mean, look, Helen Zille, in her speech today, when she was talking to the crowd in Soweto, she said that there's one thing that the local government does, which is that it delivers basic services, nothing else. That's not true. One of the big things that municipalities do is they decide what almost everything that any business can do is decided by whether or not the municipality allows them. So everything has to receive permission. Everything. If you get new heavy equipment, if you want to get a license to trade liquor, if you want to build, if you want to occupy an existing building, everything has to be approved. And that means that you've got this gatekeeper sitting here that can strangle or empower any business it chooses. Now, this is an underappreciated fact of municipalities in South Africa, and so we don't look at it. We think that they are some kind of impartial guys who come and they run pipes and electrical supplies and things, and they don't just do that. They can also provide financial incentives for people to move from one area to the other. They can change how people develop in parts of the municipality. They can fight or encourage illegal settlements. And this remains an area in which the DA has this latter point remains an area the DA have a very poor track record. The Western Cape has the highest rate of informal settlement in the country, and it's the only province in which it's been growing. Yes. In Cape Town itself, we see the second highest rates of informal settlement after Durban, but everyone knows Durban's a shit that cannot be rescued. So we're looking at a very, very nasty situation. And the size of the informal settlements is 90% of the size of the population that's not born in the province. There's an enormous amount of overlap with this. So
yes, just in my area,
dealing with some rather big problems. And
new informal settlement has come up. They have said that they're going to move them from the other one and put them into the second one, but I don't think that those from the first one are going to move. So I think that it's a bit of a pipe dream that. So they are claiming that they're going to move them from the first to the second. This is what the local council says. But we know the way these things go. All those people living in the first one are not going to want to move, and they're going to put up a fight.
Yep.
So
it depends what they do, because I mean, in some areas they're perfectly happy. In some areas. But the thing is, in some areas, they're perfectly happy on placing extraordinary pressures. So when I was talking to the people in Eersterivier, now Eersterivier is an interesting settlement, right? So there's this huge area called the Temba Farms, and it's one of the last green inclusions in the metropole outside of Philippi, right? And it's about 50-50 informal sort of subsistence farmers versus residents, and the informal farmers, the subsistence farmers, have been there since before the ANC came to power nationally, right? There's a farmer who abandoned his farm in, I think, 1990. The property is registered in Stellenbosch. The servitudes belong to the province, and the land sits within the municipality. It's a very confusing situation. However, that aside, these people have been there for a while, and the initial settlement existed because the people who lived on the farm as agricultural workers stayed where they were put when the farmer just up sticks and left. So what we're looking over here is a very interesting situation, because what they wanted to do, and what they wanted to do for a number of years, is build a housing settlement for 27,000 individuals, right? Wow. Most of whom will likely be immigrants from the Western Cape. Sorry, not immigrants, migrants, interprovincial migrants from the Western Cape. And what they did in order to remove these people is extraordinary. They've multiple times cut their water off. They refused them the right to build any structures, including water tanks for their animals and so on. They have, what else have they done? Oh yeah, intimidation, bribery, fraud. The list goes on. One of the things that they did there was, when the local community objected to the developments and the removals and so on, they rode by and picked literally the person who lives right on the corner as you first entered the settlement, lying drunk on the grass, apparently, according to the story, picked her as a representative for the community for the negotiations, because there's a residence forum and there's an agricultural forum for farms area. And almost every single person in the settlement signed an affidavit, and I've got, not an affidavit, a petition, and I've got a copy of the petition that said that all of them objected. They said, we didn't pick this woman to represent us in negotiations. The other person who was picked to represent them in negotiations was someone who initially fought on their behalf, but then turned around and backed the municipality, and according to residents there, started intimidating them in their household. This man is called Trevor Ludwig. Now, the claims, I have to go in person and check some of them, and I've struggled to find an opportunity to do so. But Trevor Ludwig, he's actually employed at the head of UCT Security, as it turns out. He used to have a little farm holding there, which he sold up. And according to community representatives there, he was offered land by, I can't remember if it was the city or the municipal government, the provincial government, but allegedly he was offered land. Yes. And then he switched sides. And so you've got this situation where they've gone out of their way, and where they wanted to remove them to, there were already people living. Yes. And those people were threatened with having their SASSA grants cut in order to move out of the way so these people could be displaced, right? They were eventually moved by court order separately. So, but I mean, this is a cock up of note. So the weird thing is, when you look at the official documents, the excuses they use to try and remove these people, under COVID, they said they needed to be removed for de-densification purposes. And they're replacing less than 400. They're replacing like 400 people with 27,000.
Do you think?
In order to, de-densification?
Is what driving? I mean, here's maybe I'd be just being cynical, but do you think that what is driving that is the DA's their desire to win the national vote? No. So if they can. What is driving such lunacy?
Yes and no. I mean, here's the thing. I think that there are different forces. So there's local patronage, which often includes gangs who are tied to construction companies, because in order to get to get people employed who will actually do their job, you kind of need contracts with gang structures, and then they'll make leverage. They'll impose leverage on you. So there's a lot of these local operators. Then you've got large national, usually from Johannesburg. The amount of local construction companies they're employing is going down. They're leaning more into Johannesburg companies and national level companies. And
why
these
is
companies
that?
will be selected to do the.
Is that again because of the patronage? Must be money.
That's a good question. It's a good question. I don't know. There's a likelihood that there may be donors connected to these, but we don't know. It might just be that you're looking for the contractors. This guy offers the best price. Who knows? Could be. But so you get these things going down. But then also you've got national targets, and you've got them trying to hit KPIs. So they're saying, "Oh, we need to house so many people. Let's just house them." And it doesn't matter who. It doesn't matter in what order. It doesn't matter if they jump the queue. Right? Just get people in houses. So there are a lot of pressures on the DA to do various things, and the lower downs will try and make things happen. However, and I mean, it makes me think of an observation that someone made about the gangs, where guys who are very successful in the criminal underworld don't actually order that many hits. The majority of murders are from low to mid-level guys chasing very petty beefs. So this is one of those things where most of the big nasty maneuvers that you'll get in politics will be done by low and mid-level individuals, and then the big picture stuff will often involve sweeping up the mess and handing out broad orders that can be interpreted as completely legal and ethical, but then they'll be carried out in very rough-edged ways. It's part of the course, I think, but you have to have the determination to do certain things, and you have to have your priorities right. And I'm not sure the DA have their priorities in the right place. I mean, look, several of the corruption stories that I have looked at in the past. So now Neisner, which lost its DA majority not long after the whole Mike Hampton saga, although I think it's more connected to demographic changes than anything else. They're still wrestling with trying to whip the ANC-led coalition into providing services. So there's currently a threat at the moment of placing the municipality under administration. That's being contested, and it has to be negotiated with national government. It's a whole mess, and it takes ages. And then you've got one of the ones that I found very irritating was Joe Emilio reported on this, which is Alveendal. So this is in Mossel Bay, where they've proposed a set of policies. The public commentary participation is closed yesterday. What they had is a situation where they wanted to impose this framework that would have taken control of people's property away from them. They would have been able to ban them from owning dogs, planting certain things in their gardens, and then ratchet up the fees that were charged to them for living in an area that's environmentally zoned as an environmental protected area. And this would have their properties were placed under forced to be placed under what they called a homeowners association, but seems to be intended as some kind of municipal body. And then by using the environmental legislation and bylaws, they put increasing pressure on these people until they can't afford their homes and are forced to sell. So I'm not sure if this is never know if this is actually going to end up being a nature reserve in the long run, or whether once they've pushed sufficient number of people into penury, they're going to let some private guy come and buy up the lot. So remains to be seen. But it's very dodgy and very unpleasant. I mean, look, they're in for a shock, because they're not going to be able to keep up with the changes, and they're not going to be able to keep control of these municipalities for a long time. I mean, the municipal demarcation board's already sort of pushing for ward boundary changes in Overstrand. I haven't been able to check the demographics of that area in fine enough detail to know how that will affect the local elections, but I suspect that might be not in their favor, given that the municipal demarcation board is entirely under the control of the ANC. And yeah, I mean, the old problems in Garden Route are still coming to a head, because guys who've been accused of stealing money going back 14 years are only now getting disciplinary proceedings leveled against them. This guy, a municipal manager, Mbulelo Memani, he's facing disciplinary charge hearing now. These things move so slowly.
Yes.
And
so when
it's
when you so no, I was just going to say, so when many people hear us talking about this, they will say, well, what do I do? I'm just a small fry. I'm just one person, and what can I do to try fix these things? Now, obviously, it's who you can vote for. I mean, that's one thing, but voting is only every once in a while. Secondly, well, you could try get onto a municipality and try to push things in the right direction, but many people, they're business owners or they are mothers with children. So getting onto a municipality might be a little bit out of their range. What do you think of the idea of building up, I call them like pressure groups. So it could be, say, 20 businessmen in a area get together and form some kind of group and use certain mechanisms to try pressure municipalities in the right direction. So that whole thing, united we stand, divided we fall. And I think as minorities, we are very divided and everyone's on their own mission. That's my sense. So what do you think of the idea of people in areas like Neisner, Drakenstein, Plettenberg Bay?
It's difficult.
I'll
say it's difficult.
These pressure groups.
No, I'll say it's difficult and it's tricky because you want to stay independent from the main big parties. But getting into local government, once you want to gain leverage, Neisner, they've had problems, because they have an independent party over there. I think it's called Neisner Independent Movement or something like that. So the lady behind that has been a sort of ratepayers association sort of person and campaign against local corruption for a long time. But then you get sucked into the practical politics of the DA's coalition, and you really can't rock the boat too much, because look, the big lesson for me was watching what the DA did to the Vryheidsfront Plus about a year and a bit ago. So they faced a problem with a corrupt mayor in Oudtshoorn, and even the DA councillors over there wanted rid of him, right? Mm. But once the Vryheidsfront Plus initiated the vote of no confidence and he was gotten rid of, the DA was instructed to not collaborate with the Vryheidsfront Plus, and the district's whip, the regional whip, actually said, no, we're going to kick you out of every single coalition in every hung municipality across the province. So what they did then is, they forced the Vryheidsfront Plus to form a coalition with everyone else, because they didn't even show up to negotiations. And the Vryheidsfront Plus's position was actually eminently reasonable. They said, look, we don't like this mayor. We like working with you as a party, that's fine, but we don't like this mayor and we want someone else. So pick another councillor. They wouldn't pick another councillor. So that ended up being a coalition with the ANC. And then that guy who works for News 24, who so often takes their line, Marvin Charles, in subsequent articles when they were during this whole clashing period, he framed it in the terms, the sort of very partisan terms that the DA used, which is to say, oh, look, the Vryheidsfront Plus's new partner, the ANC, this kind of phrasing. And they did this in Swellendam. So Swellendam, they faced all kinds of tender fraud allegations, which were proven to be substantial by the Vermaak report that was made public. One of the charges that couldn't be determined was the accusation that the DA tried to bribe an ANC councillor to stand down and run in the by-election under the DA's ticket in his old seat. And there was like 2 million rand behind that bribe, allegedly. And apparently Jaco Lont was involved. Allegedly, the mayor is involved. But then Ron van Schalkwyk, in his attempt to try and get this sorted out, he creates a lot of public stink. So the DA and their friends start launching frivolous police charges against him and his personal assistant until his PA just quits and runs away. And I mean, it's just the most malicious situation. And when it was coming to a head, the Vryheidsfront Plus national leadership, at the time Groenewald was in charge of the party, reaches over the head of the provincial branch. Everything was still being negotiated by Corne Mulder. The national branch initiates processes to expel Jean van Schalkwyk from the party, and they do it. And then the DA is sort of placated, and then they all sew things quietly up for Swellendam, right? But I mean, this happened across the border. They tried so hard. They went to these degrees to get rid of the Vryheidsfront Plus for having the temerity to have a say. But what was happening in Oudtshoorn when this began was that they didn't agree to certain budget items. That's how this started. They didn't agree to certain budget items. So the DA said, no, we're just not going to work with our own coalition partners. We'll go to the ANC. ANC will vote. We'll cut them in somehow. And they'll vote for the budget, and the coalition partners don't matter, right? And then when the coalition partners come and form a government with the ANC because the DA don't want to participate, they say, oh, look, you're working with the ANC. So this is the pattern. See, I can't remember where it was.
What's the way through this?
The thing is to shine a light on this and get people to turn their backs on the DA whenever they behave this way. So if you're having a situation like Stellenbosch, everyone should move over to either the Vryheidsfront Plus, the Cape Independence Party, or the Referendum Party. One of the parties that's fairly good on tracking these scandals is actually the Good Party. The problem is that when they're in charge of something, they side with the ANC. They want to spend tons of money. They don't look after the finances well. So they're not the greatest party to govern. But if you want to actually keep track of scandals that the DA run, the Good Party hate them with a fiery vengeance. And so they're very good to keep track of. I mean, Brett Herron, formerly a member of the DA, he talks very openly about the DA's process of how they run. And there was an interview he did with, I think, Roscoe. I always call him Roscoe Gordon, but that's a honky-tonk player from the 1950s. What the hell is this guy? Roscoe Palm, I think. Roscoe Palm. So he has a little podcast that very few people listen to, but almost as small as ours. And there was a thing with Brett Herron on it where he explained that when you have a donor, they designate somebody to go and look after that donor and make sure that whatever that donor wants, they get out of the municipality. And if they don't get that, they cut their funding, right? So the management of donors becomes an extraordinarily powerful lever because they deliberately focus on it as a matter of principle within the party.
Yeah,
and they're focused on two things only, making sure.
Which is why one way through this is by getting donors to donate to or push them in the right direction. So that's one. But then you obviously need a lot of cash. Secondly,
if you can donate money,
and to try.
If you can donate money, donate it to someone to the right of the DA, so that you can drag them along. Because if you don't have that leverage, the DA is going to keep drifting leftward.
Yes, which is why the Referendum Party is fantastic to go for, and the Vryheidsfront Plus, even the PA. Although, anyways, let's not go there now.
I beg to differ. I have a very hard line against them. I'm afraid until they deal with their gangster connection problems.
Okay, just to take another line. That's why I think what we are doing as the Cape Independent newspaper is so important. It's independent journalism who can shine a spotlight on these and try to push the public in the right direction. But we don't have enough independent journalists, and the funding for it is, well, I mean, part of the whole thing is,
it's dismal, yes.
Yeah,
but you can go to our website, and in our About tab, you can go visit our Buy Me a Coffee and dump a few pennies in there.
There you go. The other strategy that I know I have talked to you about is starting small local newspapers. So obviously, Cape Independent covers the whole Cape, but then let's say you live in Malmesbury, start a small local newspaper just for your town that is aligned with people like us, and that will push your local readers in a certain direction. Because now, let's say you have 50 or 100 of these small local newspapers that start up all over the Cape, that are all pushing the DA in the right direction.
See.
You don't think?
See, no, that's very good. I mean, because at the moment it's mostly Facebook groups. So you've got like groups like Stop Cocked, or you've got various sort of besorgde inwoner pages and things like that. And I think the thing is that a lot of these people need. I would say you are welcome to come and write us anything. It doesn't have to be like Shakespeare. If it covers something important to your local community, we want to see it. Yeah, we want to see your writing. Come and talk to us. Email at us at editor@capeindependent.com. That email is still up and running. Although I'm soon going to have to replace it with at thecapeindependent.com, which this year has been dear mekaar, I'm afraid.
It's also Could I segue into another direction, and that's kind of linked to self-determination, because obviously we want to pursue self-determination. There's also another way through this. And there's a really cool interview that people must go watch that Phil Craig did with the chap from the channel Alles Afrikaans. So Alles Afrikaans, it's they get a couple thousand views. Yes? No.
Yeah. Alles Afrikaans, you're saying. Yes.
Yes.
It's linked in the description of the video. You can go look at that. Also, what's linked in the description of the video, just by the way, is if you are in Overstrand, there's a link to the public participation, the post from the municipality about the changes to the ward boundaries. So if you want to go and comment on that or look at how it affects your area, please do check that. But yeah, the Alles Afrikaans interview with Phil Craig is also in the description. So if you want to watch that, you can go check that out. But you were saying, David?
Yes, no, it was great. And I think he made a really excellent point, which is something I'd love to highlight now, is that unless the Afrikaners pursue self-determination, they're not going to exist in 100 years. And he obviously just threw out that number, but you could call it 80 years maybe, or 70 years. And because all the current trends are saying this, because what's happening is that the Afrikaner identity is being eroded through law and through various other mechanisms. Many Afrikaners obviously have left. And so as soon as you leave to go to America, or
economic pressures, legal pressures,
Afrikaans is gone, because now you live in Australia. Your children are going to become Australian. Don't think that they're going to continue. And so I think it's a fantastic point that if Afrikaners are serious, there's that guy Bok van Blair, and he wrote that song Ek ben Afrikaner. You must go to watch it. It's really great. It's based on that line that Hendrik Bibal in 1707 around then, in Stellenbosch, he coined that phrase Ek ben Afrikaner. So if Afrikaners are serious, they have to pursue self-determination, otherwise they are not going to exist. And I mean, look, me as an Anglo, I've already accepted that the Anglos here are done. So I really don't think anything's going to bring them back here. I think if you're an Anglo, either become Afrikaans or move to England. That's kind of like my view. Either, because I mean, what are the Anglos doing here? They're just giving up ground each day. But but when thinking about the Afrikaans in particular, I think it was just a really great point that Phil Craig made.
Yeah, no, I mean, look, he's been making it for some time. He's been making it for some time, and I think it's accurate. I mean, look, if you look at Afrikaner commentators a lot, you'll notice that there's a sort of claustrophobia and anxiety, which I think is fairly well grounded. A lot of people sort of look at Solidariteit and AfriForum and they get a bit frustrated with the pace of change. And look, everyone's very impressed with them and everybody's very proud of them. But at the same time, you're going to look at the objective rate of transformation and decay in South Africa, and you go like, what are we doing? Are we moving fast enough to keep up? And I mean, look, comments from people like Frans Cronje talking about enclave societies and so on. My anxiety, and I think it's one that's shared by a lot of people, is that this is not something that every minority can be part of at the moment, because it's just driven by market dynamics, and not everyone can afford to live in a gated community. Not everyone can afford to live in something that's very secure and well serviced and so on. And there's this risk that you get a hollowing out of society where you erode and you erode and you erode, and that layer that is capable of living a comfortable life gets thinner and thinner and thinner. And the thing is that at no point do they feel like this evaporation process is affecting them. That layer that's fine, when they make the decision to leave the country, they're not doing it because there's a gun to their head. They're making that decision because, fuck it, whatever. And there's the problem with this is you get the situation where everyone believes quite concretely that nothing should be done, everything is fine, and the people who do believe that something needs to change don't have access to organization, they don't have access to capital, they don't have access to platform, and they don't have a coherent strategy, and as a consequence the evaporative cooling process continues. So we're looking at a very, very unpleasant sort of situation unless we can shift gears. Because, I mean, even intellectuals that I very much admire, like Koos Malan, will talk about this inevitable process of the replacement of state services by the general public, by the private sector. And they'll say, okay, well, South Africa's balkanizing, it's localizing, it's enclavizing, or however you want to put it, and devolution is happening organically. But the fact remains that the legal permits for doing anything remain in the hands of local, provincial, and national government. And nobody who's living in these enclaves has so far decided to show the finger to any of these authorities and disobey the law directly and unambiguously. And I don't know that any of them have the wherewithal to do so. I mean, let's say tomorrow we have...
No, so what they'll do is they will, for instance, if their business is 50 employees, they'll just create 3 businesses each with 15 to bypass employment equity. So what they'll do is they'll tweak it. But what they're doing, they're just delaying the inevitable, because we know that employment equity at the moment is sitting at what it's sitting at. If you have 40 or more, 50 or more, or it'll soon be 10 or more. So that's where they're going.
Yeah, and it's not just that. I mean, the strictness of these quotas gets increases with every generation. So you look at like the people born since between 1950 and 1970. They're still dealing with like fairly reasonable quotas there at the top of their careers, right? The managerial class of that age, they're dealing with actually fairly lax racial quotas, and so for them it's not incredibly disruptive, and it's not a complete bar to their success. But new hires are now getting stricter and stricter and stricter, and even entering into a new career is now you're at absolute representation level everywhere. And this is what this does to people, is because of the limited job opportunities, people have to keep moving across the country. So you have no stable community anywhere that can address the issues at a local level, because they don't know what's going on. They don't know what's happening. And this constant mobility is just destroying everything. It's corrosive.
And that's why I think, coming back to my point of forming local business networks is so important. Like, I'm part of one here. And there's 600 businesses, and they only support each other. Now, I understand that is not, we need more, but at least it's something that these 600 businesses can mitigate, because now they are supporting each other, and they only support each other. So at least that can do something. But we do need legal, we need a change in law. We actually need self-determination.
But it's not just that. I mean, look, changing law is one thing. I think it comes down to actually the willpower of individuals to resist the state or the local government or what have you. to be able to say when we're dealing with issues, okay, we're going to make this public, and we're going to stamp our feet and say this is it, you know. And people just tend not to do that, you know. They'll choose not to do that, and I think this is, you know, people are choosing not to act because they don't want to rock the boat.
Exactly.
But I mean,
they
it's
don't want
like,
to
you know,
look
we've
bad
already
on
got
their
stormy water.
Instagram. Or no, to their LinkedIn
Yeah,
account.
and
They
they
don't want to look bad on their LinkedIn.
Well, forget LinkedIn account. I mean, you're talking about local businesses. They're not looking at LinkedIn. It's more about, can I maintain a decent relationship with the local municipality? Can I retain a decent relationship with my neighbors? Because there'll be these vested little local networks that are connected to the party and will tell you, you know, oh, you're going against the party. Do you want the ANC in, or whatever the hell they're doing? And they'll protect the image of the party before they'll protect the interests of the community. And it's very, very common. So
definitely,
I think it's hard to get over that hurdle. It's very hard to get over that hurdle. But you know what we're looking at. I think, you know, what we're looking at here is something that's it's been boiling quietly and cavitating quietly for a while, and really it's up to the few of us who are already sort of positioned to engage mentally, to make the first move and put pieces together to give people fora to do this in. And this is going to involve a hell of a lot of effort, because targeting policies that the DA are involved in, it's going to require organizing local businesses, but it's also going to require organizing amongst the colored community. It's going to require building platforms that can accrue funding for lawfare, a whole bunch of things. So, you know, it's a lot of work. It's a lot of hard work, and someone's got to do it. You know, I think people will come if the platform's there.
On the media front, because obviously we're in that game. I know many of the people that watch this and read our content will watch Biz News and the Troop Report and Morning Shots and all these. And I've noticed that I don't ever hear them talk about how radical the next generation are. Biz News will often interview people like Frans Cronje, who I do have respect for him, and others. And I don't hear many of them on those very popular shows talk about actually how radical the next generation are. Like, for example, one data point, if you go look at the SRCs, so SRCs at a university level get voted in. So the student body vote them in every year. Now, if you look at WITS, UCT, many of them, in particular WITS and UCT, because those were the ones that I crunched the numbers on, over the last 5 to 10 years, parties like the EFF and the Progressive Youth Alliance have dominated, which means that the students right now are voting in radical parties that want redistribution.
Look, that's been true for some time. What I will give these guys.
Why don't they talk about it? Like, why don't?
Because they can dismiss it very easily. They can say, well, look, universities are a tiny portion of the population. Only a tiny portion of the university actually votes. So this is a minority of a minority of a minority, the fringe of the fringe.
That's not true, because
sure, but
because at the universities, in order for the SRC election to be validated, it has to have 25% of the student body, and 25% is not a small amount.
Yes, but right, but they will say that it is. Do you understand? So here's the thing. The other side of it is that most people. Yeah.
Go. Sorry, go.
Yeah, but you forget one thing, which is that how we're thinking about it is not how ordinary people think about it. So, for example, someone like you or I would look at that and say, okay, that's telling you where the leadership of the next generation are.
Exactly. Right? It's the leadership, yes.
But what the The leadership, yes. And then what the pollsters will say is, well, no, that's not the leadership of the next generation. They'll look at it as, oh, that's a sample of the current population's general opinions, and then people become more pragmatic as they get older and enter the workforce. And to an extent, some of this is true, and you can't just hand wave it away. But there have been a few studies that look that segregate people by age. Now, I don't get to look at the raw data in the Social Research Foundation or the IRR or what have you. But the few studies that I have seen that are published on this show that there is a strong positive correlation between youth and the African nationalism. And the people who lean towards the DA are like this like sliver of the middle class, middle-aged.
Totally.
And
100%.
Those are also the people that you really want to get organized, unfortunately, but they're all sort of stuck going, well, how do I pay my bills? And these guys are the least controversial, most competent people that are visible to me, and that's how they make their decision. But the problem is that, a static 2/3 of the voting age population continue to select black nationalist parties. And the question you then have to ask is the leadership of that electoral bloc becoming more or less radical? And they're becoming more radical. Now, this thing that I've shared on the screen at the moment is from a little the last opinion article that I published, which is a reflection on a poll that was made a year ago. Now, pollsters will always point fairly reasonably to this kind of question. And this particular question has been asked by every poll in South Africa and continues to ask, what are the main problems faced by South Africa? And you pick a number of them, and then the ones that come on top. And it's always stuff like, unemployment, corruption, and infrastructure, and safety and security, and what have you. So, and then, we go down to land reform, and then like, oh, okay, well, that's actually, number 9 or whatever it is on the list. So, like, who cares? It's like we don't have to worry about it. And I think, sure, it's low priority, but how are people actually thinking about the solutions to these problems organically? Do people think that unemployment is solved by land redistribution? Do they think it's solved by racial discrimination? And so that second order question is not necessarily interrogated, and people want to publish the optimistic stuff. So there's that. But then you get this question, and this question: are you in favor or against the following policies? And so black economic empowerment, there's a majority in support of it. It's 54 to 30. So it's nearly twice as many people support as oppose, with that 15% gray area, right, of people who don't care. And considering it's an incumbent policy rather than a proposal, that 15% really actually stands on the green side, because those are the people who will do something. Those are the people who won't do anything about it, which is, essentially status quo. The most interesting one is that land reform with no compensation is more popular than land reform with compensation. I mean, it's staggering. And then independence of the Cape. Now, that one I found fascinating, because you've got 24% of the population say that they support this, right? Now that's bigger than the size of the ethnic minorities in the country. And this is very interesting. Of course, the question is phrased as including the Eastern Cape, which explains this to some degree. But I think, what you're seeing is a very, very deep division. That's a very deep division in the population. This is done by a Brazilian polling company called Atlas Intel, I think. Atlas Intel. And so they also had reasonably accurate polling on the outcomes of the elections, not quite as sharp and crisp as Gareth van Onselen's, I'm afraid, but they did a good job for a foreign company, and they took account of many things. I think, the takeaway from this for me is mainly that we are not paying attention to how rigidly attached people are to the status quo. They want change, but they can't define mechanisms for change. They want good outcomes, but they can't define what needs to be taken away or added to the recipe. They just say, well, we want better people, we want less corruption, we want blah, blah, blah. But how do you pick people? How do you decide who to trust to deliver those things? These are difficult questions. And let's say you trust no one and you just want the policy, you don't care. How are you going to create the leverage? These are not easy questions.
Yeah. No, I agree. Those are all great points. And my gut feel from interacting with young kids, age 70, 80, 19, 20 to up to 25, and I try to talk to them when I can, is more of them would definitely be happy with racial laws if it means they have a job. That's just my gut feel from speaking to many of them. If it means that they have a job, they have no problem that they are favored because of their melanin count. And there's a desire element there, and one person desires it, then another person, and there's this desire. It sort of takes on a bit of a crowd element to it because now everyone wants it, so it just sort of takes off like a fire. And that is my big concern with this place in 10 years, 20 years. As the years go on and the boomers become unproductive and they die off. I mean, just another random data point. There's this young chap that I know. He has not gone to university. He finished high school 3 years ago. So he's now 21. And he wrote a piece, this article for me. And the whole thing was a very radical piece about how the Israeli state is super evil and they're destroying and killing the journalists in Gaza. So it was this whole thing about how journalists in Gaza are being targeted by the Israelis. Now, whether it is also true is not the point, but what I saw is almost a religious element around the whole Gazan story. And now he didn't go to university. He's just a very average young person. And Grant, and so I would love to, and typically what I see happening at the moment is that the Gazan lot, the Black African nationalists have there's a bit of a synergy between them.
Well, it makes sense. It makes sense for so many reasons. I mean, it's not complicated. I think the whole settlement narrative, colonization, forced removals. Of course they're gonna side with them, and it's also just who they were allied with in the Cold War. I mean, the Cold War defined allegiances. The ANC is aligned with Palestine, Russia, China, and the old South Africa was allied with Israel and the United States. And so quite naturally you're going to see this playing out in subsequent generations. People inherit their political views.
Yeah, exactly. So what this indicates to me is that the next generation are going to be more aligned with BRICS countries, more aligned with anti-Western ideas.
Yeah, because I mean, there's a demographic component. Now, unfortunately, I couldn't get these bloody images to align because I suck at this. But this was something I brought up. Now, there are many, many such examples. This is a map of English territories in France in 1154. Why does that matter to a conversation about South African opinion polls? Well, because this is the electoral map in 2022. Look at that. There and there. It's the same map. It's the same map. That's 1,000 years. Well, 900 years, but it's 1,000 years. Yes. And the people vote according to political divisions. This has got nothing to do with race. I don't even have to bring up race. It doesn't matter. Point is, people's political divisions are inherited. Reordering the political environment requires changing demographics, right? It requires popular mobility. It requires dissolution and reorganization of institutions. It requires radical change. to shift these things. If the French Revolution and conquest by several foreign powers did not remove this particular distinction from 1,000 years ago, then why do we think we can change this? The South African electoral results are static when you talk about ethnic voter blocks.
Yes.
Okay. You got minorities voting one way, you got African nationalists voting another, and the balance between the two remains roughly the same. I don't know what to say. I mean, it's not just France, it's, Ukraine and Poland. And, this is an unavoidable scenario. This is how things are carried out. Former empires and their boundaries dictate how people's political attitudes are formed, and they shape people's partisan allegiance in the present day. So the idea that this is something that we can simply, campaign away in the public square, it doesn't make sense to me. It doesn't.
No, people
So
say
it's got to do with taking power. Yeah.
They say,
Go on.
politics. People say that politics is downstream from culture, which is kind of what you were saying there. Is those institutions, those are cultural things?
Well, I don't say anything's downstream of anything else. I think this is an error. There's nothing that's downstream of anything else. Everything is part of a cycle. So look at those political boundaries. Those are not ethnic groups. Those are groups of people who are governed by different empires back in the day. The Soviet part of Germany votes differently from the NATO part of Germany. So this was this is something that, conquest and reshaping of societies, it transforms, it gets baked in. And then you got to ask yourself, okay, so culture is downstream of law. I mean, look at how the effect of the Civil Rights Act on the American public.
Yes,
it's profound.
Yes.
So the thing is, it's not that these things can't be changed, but that they can't be changed without coercion. And once you've established a dichotomy, the dichotomy is very, very, very difficult to erase. And the dichotomy in South Africa is, do you see? So, and then that dichotomy in turn defines laws and places pressures on things. So whether we talk about culture coming first, law coming first, whatever, these things affect each other in ways that people don't perceive and don't pay attention to. They're not willing to consider them. And the inability to consider a factor places in a huge section of reality beyond your control. And, even if something's beyond your control, you should be able to react to it in a way that protects you from negative effects. I mean, you can't cry if you're not shielding your face against flying rocks when you're going at high speed, This is bananas. But, people don't if people don't want to look at something, they won't. I try my darndest to keep my eye on things that, whether it's liberals or black nationalists, if they're saying something that's true, I want to know it, because I don't want something that's going to be giving me a blind spot. But most people cherish their blind spots.
On that point, I was thinking of this conversation. Oh man, it was maybe a few years back. I remember listening to Ramaphosa. He was talking about the Afrikaans businessmen and how they were refusing to do things a certain way. Oh man, I wish I could find it. But it made me realize that. In this whole conversation, it made me realize that there is, in some sense, like a clash of, I don't know if you call it a worldview, but a way in which things are done. So, for example, in Zulu communities, if you want to do business, you do business in a certain way. The Afrikaans do business in a different way. I'm just using but you could say the way that the English do business is different to the way that the Sotho do business. And I remember him making some comment like that about how the Afrikaans were refusing to do business the way that he wanted them to do it. And I'm not exactly too sure what he is meaning by that, but would you have any idea of?
No, he means I know what he means. I know what he means. I mean, there's a fantastic interview which he did with Harry Oppenheimer back in the 90s. That's covered in his biography by Anthony Butler. And well, actually, two interviews. One in which Harry Oppenheimer was involved, and one which is separate from this. So with the one with Harry Oppenheimer, this is before the ANC comes to power, but not by long, maybe by a year or so. And he says, we're going to come and take your minds from you. And then after Harry Oppenheimer's been sort of very bored with Cyril's comments about how badly the quality of life for Black South Africans is going, which is pretty bad. So he goes on about this, and then Harry Oppenheimer says, "That's fascinating, Mr. Ramaphosa, very interesting." And Ramaphosa loses his temper and says, "We're going to take your minds." And he says, "Well, you've got to remember, Mr. Ramaphosa, that a mine is just a hole in the ground." And so, we get this, it's very cheeky. But there's a moment where he failed. He got outmaneuvered by that Johnny Copeland, I think is the guy's name, the guy who runs Hoskins Consolidated, and, which holds, majority share in, traffic services, water reticulation, ENCA, Golden Arrow buses, a whole bunch of stuff, right? So he got outmaneuvered by him for a key piece of Anglo-American that was being spun off. And he reflects on it in an interview, and he says, well, this empowerment stuff doesn't really work because it's not permanent and it's not guaranteed. And this is before they formalized, concrete laws for Black economic empowerment. And then there was a decisive case as well a few years after BEE, somewhere in the mid-2000s, where Black members of the party of a company sold off their shares, and they were told some people just went after the company again and said, "Oh, well, you haven't got enough Black people anymore." And they said, "Well, the court basically rules again. Once you're empowered, you're empowered for life. That's the end of the story. You don't get to double dip, right?" So these things, Ramaphosa was basically saying, look, I can't make this business stuff work quite as well as Patrice Motsepe can, but that's because it's not real empowerment. It's only real empowerment if it's coercive. And so what he's saying to the Afrikaners in this context, I believe, is that you're not doing business in a way that benefits me in a guaranteed fashion. Yes. You need to change because I need to benefit. It doesn't matter what you get out of it. And you need to play ball or else. This is the mentality that I see. And it's got less to do with the sort of mechanical protocols of everyday commercial culture, and more to do with macro scale ethno-political culture. So this is my perspective on his comments.
Okay, no, that's a helpful thought. That is a helpful thought.
Yeah. But I mean, on that front, this is a big criticism I have of the solidarity movement, which I love these people to death. I think they're brilliant. But there's one character, and again, this is one of those things where it's hard to criticize the guy because he's achieved so much and he's done so much for the movement, is Theuns Elof. I mean, you look at what he's done for building up Afrikaans schooling. It's tremendous. It's some of it's eye-watering if you consider how much work goes into it.
Yeah.
But there's one front on which I sort of look at him and I go, what are you doing? And that's the negotiations that he has with the ANC. So the attitude is more sort of like, oh, we'll have a nice forum, we'll sit down, we'll do CODISA again. But I mean, I've looked at CODISA, and in CODISA, it was like you start out with this principle of non-racialism that's inviolable. And every time you renegotiate, that gets watered down and watered down and watered down and watered down. And then every year you spend under Black government, those rights get watered down again. And now from this weak position, we don't hold the state, and we think that we're going to have as much leverage over a negotiation for our rights as we did back in 1990 or 1989 or 1993 or whatever the case may be. We don't have the leverage, and we're not willing to create the leverage. So why are we negotiating? It's not getting us anything tangible. It's not even buying time, really. You know, it gives you a rosy feeling, but I mean, I don't know what it achieves, and it actually scares me that this is how he's approaching the problem. So, and here's the other thing, and I mean, I've said this in private as well. Is I think, you know, AfriForum and Solidarity and so on, they're very irritated with the sort of Bitter Einde crowd and with Willem Petzer and so on, and I understand where that's coming from. And to some degree, they're right to be concerned.
Why is that?
Well, I think it's because of the way that the Bitter Einders have conducted themselves many times in the past. They haven't been very professional. They've been very they've taken risks that don't really have any payoff. They've chosen battles poorly in many cases. They've had a recent success that's worth taking note of, where they managed to win that case against Julius Malema for hate speech. I've actually spoken to that lawyer who did the case. It's very interesting. But all of those details aside, you look at someone like Willem Petzer. He has an enormous following. He has a very big following, and people respect him, and people trust his input. And he could be very dangerous to the movement. And if they can't keep up with the expectations that people who are turning to Willem Petzer have, then they run the risk that at a certain point, if Willem Petzer decides that he wants to, you know, build his own organizing base, he can split the support for the Solidarity movement. And he doesn't need to take much for it to be difficult for them to achieve what they need to achieve. And so, for my money, they need to start thinking about, you know, addressing some of the underlying challenges. Because even if you're just going for like a containment strategy, you understand, much like the DA, much like how the DA or the Tories in the UK or whoever you're talking about. There was something that the editor of The Spectator in the UK said that was very interesting. So he's a lefty, right? He believes in every left-wing thing there is. But he runs a paper that's
Fraser Nelson. Is that Fraser Nelson?
That's the one.
Dude, that guy.
Fraser Nelson. Fraser Nelson. But he said something that's absolutely fascinating and very, very instructive. And I think for all parties, whether you're trying to do good or just cover your own arse, strategically, it's a valuable piece of information. Right? What he said is that if you make it clear that you're at least addressing people's concerns, right, then you don't always have to give them exactly what they're asking for, right? You can give them something where they can at least tangibly see, okay, something's being done, but you can't just dismiss them, because if you just out of hand dismiss them, you end up in a situation which the Democrats ended up with Donald Trump, where they're like, okay, well, this is a joke and this guy's a lunatic and what have you. And then he comes to power because everyone just says, well, when you're saying this is garbage and when you're saying it's stupid, then you're telling me I'm garbage and stupid. And I'm not garbage and stupid. I'm a real human being, and my life has value, that whole cliche. So you can't be dismissive of your challenges. If they're splitting your support base, you have to address it.
Yes.
You have to say, okay, well, what are we doing wrong? What could we be doing more of? What should we stop doing? And it should result in some kind of reflection. At the moment, they're very fortunate in that, Willem Petzer has, he has a great amount of potential, but at the moment, he doesn't have an audience so big that he can press the button tomorrow and cause trouble. But very soon, I can foresee a future in which he's in a position to negotiate positions that could come up in both Bitter Einders and in the Solidarity movement. And the thing about the Bitter Einders is I think that they know this because, Willem Petzer kind of sets the tone to a great extent for what they do, and vice versa. I mean, they talk to each other a lot. So when you get to this kind of thing, you have to when you get into this position where you've actually got a new challenger to the right, you have to address it. The ANC understands this. The ANC understands this. And it's hurting them to some extent because they're getting outpaced, right? But they also know that if they don't address the radicals' criticisms, if they don't address those, they're going to run afoul of there's a baked-in ideology, and if you talk to almost any black nationalist, or even sort of moderates, they think that the ANC is captured by white interests. Right? A lot of people believe this. I don't know how much, but I know it's a lot. It's almost everyone I speak to. They think that the ANC is to some degree captured by white interests. So if Ramaphosa decides to lean too heavily into the ANC, he's going to be stabbed in the back by almost everybody within arm's reach. Right? And these recent comments that he made about the DA having better run municipalities. I mean, we're leading into the local government elections now. He has been threatened by some people in his party with being kicked out. There are a lot of people who are after him right now. He's weak because of the Mkhwanazi scandal, because one of his boys, Senzo Mchunu, I should say, was, at the head of a network of assassins. This is big news, and the radical opposition are making hay with it.
What made him make those comments about the DA? What do you think drove him to say those?
It's a good question. See, that's the thing. I have no idea how his brain works. It's very difficult to see. There's certain moves that you can see over time that make sense. Because, everyone downplays him and sort of says he's not a great leader or whatever. But he's the president. How the hell? In the 90s, when he was a nobody, he was an outsider to the party, he manages to get the ear of Nelson Mandela and sit at the table alongside him. Now, regardless of what you think is going on with Ramaphosa and what his shortcomings are, you've got to deal with the fact that he knows how to move into place. So he's signaling to somebody. I don't know who.
No,
he's trying to.
He's super cunning. He is very, very cunning. I wouldn't call him intellectually smart, but the guy is a very, very cunning player, without a doubt.
Yeah, and I mean, this is my question. Is I look at that sort of paralysis that the DA is sort of in, and I sort of see this as an environment in which Ramaphosa is actually very comfortable. It makes me think very much of Angela Merkel in a way. Now, Angela Merkel is much more decisive, and she chooses to do things very suddenly. But what's interesting is that she would always wait for a crisis before she'd make any changes. And then she'd leave it until the last possible minute before making a declaration that she would then be inflexible on. So while everyone's running around arguing about what we got to do about this, that, or the other, she just says, no, we're going to do this. And then people have to fall in line or get swallowed up by their own bickering. And Ramaphosa, gaining his reputation for forming consensus gradually, you look at what that consensus has produced. Now, it hasn't changed much in governance, but it has decided very concretely on a few points. They are partisan aligned in international affairs, but signal non-alignment in formal context. They are for radical economic transformation and are producing it with sequential legislative reforms that are being pushed out one by one by one in a grand network that was already decided on in 2012. They are very patient, but they all agree on where we are going.
Yeah, and they've been able to thin out the minorities and to make the minorities give up, be apathetic.
Well, yeah, but I mean, remember that's sort of something we already know. I mean, I think what I'm trying to look at here, particularly though, is the issue that we have is trying to understand what the ANC are actually doing, what the real challenge is, what is the timeline that we are facing, right? And if you want to understand his comments with the DA, I suspect that he wants to make it unambiguously clear that the DA are part of the governing coalition and give them enough juice to
keep them
leverage against the... Because it's almost certain that the DA is going to go into coalition with the ANC in those metros if they get into government at all. And so what this does is it places the MK and the EFF on the back foot in
Yes.
terms of access to patronage, while placing them on the front foot in relation to criticism of the status quo. But what bit it makes more sense or less sense to me is I'm not sure. But what I think is happening, because Paul Mashatile has definitely made overtures to those parties to join the ANC again. Cyril seems to be very clear on his allegiance to the DA. Now, between those two positions, where does the consensus lie? Well, the consensus is you keep on with the National Democratic Revolution. Both of those factions agree with this. So the question then is, who's the best partner to make sure the NDR is continued? Well, the DA is your partner until they become bigger than you, and then you switch. That's the picture. So you partner with the DA while they're weak, and then you ditch them when they get strong enough to challenge you. That's what I see. That's the future I see.
No, that is very interesting.
So I mean, yeah, what it tells us is we got like 5 to 10 years before it's like, what will the DA do when they can no longer promise national government? What will they do?
And where will their donors go?
Yeah, that's a good question. It's a good question. But I think the problem is that might be too late. So we have to show muscle before then as a movement. And the problem is we're looking pretty scrawny right now. So
we need money. We need someone to pull funding from the DA and get behind us.
Yeah, no, I think, look, there might be some contacts that are capable of moving things around, but it remains to be seen whether they're willing to break ranks in a concrete way. I think at the moment, because at the moment it's still the Cape Party that holds the reins, but they have they don't have enough. This merger between the two of them, that really needs to happen, and people are, for whatever their reasons, dragging their feet around certain issues, which I think are absolutely silly. I mean, the thing needs to happen. The thing really needs to happen.
Different point, but similar topic. With regards to the USA and the Cape and Simonstown, the other day when I was driving along, just taking a look at Simonstown, I was like, imagine in like 3 years, there's like some like conflict between like a Chinese ship and like a US fighter there or something. I was just thinking about that, because if you see what is happening at Simonstown Navy, where they are moving more and more and more in towards China, even the parts on the ships, what they're doing, they're in the process of moving the contracts for those electronic parts towards Chinese companies, away from companies like Siemens.
That's a development.
Western aligned, and they are now. I also heard something again. It could just be talk, but there was talk of some like Chinese ship, the Navy buying a Chinese ship or something. But there's definitely moves towards Chinese technology, and we know that the Chinese, the Russians, and the Simonstown Navy have been doing naval exercises. They do them often, and there was one planned for November, but it's apparently going to be moved. So it's well known that there's been synergy between the two. So then I thought to myself, I was like, imagine if a bit of a hot war breaks out between China and the US, and we see like a US ship sailing
over Taiwan.
Well, I mean, I'm not too sure. I mean, I'm just really thinking, but it's very clear that there is conflict between the US and China. It's very clear that these two are now, they are no longer aligned like they were, say, back in the early 2000s. And so and I mean, it is another way for us, but it's if the US sees us more as a strategic naval point, and they move in greater ways. US businesses buy up more and more of the Cape, more US citizens move in here, and we even get, I don't know, a bit of a skirmish here in False Bay. I was thinking about what is happening.
See, no, I don't foresee there ever being a skirmish. I think regardless of what happens, we're not going to see Americans get involved, physically. I don't think that there's any scenario in which that happens. Not any reasonable one. I think, if the Americans are gearing up for war, they're gearing up for war in 15 years' time. And right now they're focusing on consolidating, centralized digital financial control across their sort of possessions in the post-war territories. And I think for the rest of it, they're trying to rearrange trade so that they can onshore, or at least in the sort of parlance of our times, friendshore the manufacturing so that it's within their Western sphere of influence. The Cape of Good Hope could become an interesting point, given that they don't really control Egypt as much as they'd like. And, part of the reason that they're trying to expand Israeli control is so that they have an assured partner that can dominate that region, and eventually gain control of shipping lanes. So, I think that, we're secondary. The Middle East remains the focus. Egypt and Israel and Saudi Arabia. That little triangle remains the main focus. We're very secondary, although they're going to be very angry if Chinese gain improper control. And what you're talking about, and the talk, there will have been a long talk leading into these decisions for changing the supply chains, which will integrate us into the Chinese intelligence background. I mean, that Stellenbosch University has, developed this quantum satellite link with Beijing. So there's a lot of these telecoms and military collaboration programs that they're having with China that have been growing since around 2013 or so. And I think, again, it's that pivotal moment around 2012, 2013, where integration becomes sort of a deliberate strategy. And it comes with that declaration of preparation for the second phase of the National Democratic Revolution, where, South Africa is now deciding they're going to take a more decisive partisan stance on matters domestic and foreign, rather than a gradual building up of the instruments for doing that. And the implementation lands with Ramaphosa. America's reacting to it fairly late, although America tends to react fairly boldly, unlike China. So the likely outcome of this scenario is that America will be forced to back secessionist movements. However, I don't think they're going to stick money in our pockets. I don't think they're going to do color revolution strategies with us. What they're going to do is they're going to say, well, why don't you just take care of it? And if they can't take care of it, they're going to let it be, because they don't consider the Cape a crucial choke point. It's an area of secondary strategic value to them at best, which it's a mistake on their part, in my opinion. but that is how they see us. So I think
And so in some ways,
we can't be relying on the Americans. There's so much sucking up to the Americans happening right now, and I appreciate it. The where the Americans are going is good in some ways. In fact, in a lot of ways, they're doing things that are okay. They're reckless and they're doing it in a slipshod way sometimes, but that's America. And they're at least sort of thinking about things in the right direction now. And I think that the problem is that we're expecting they're going to come to our rescue as like the great empire is just going to stamp its foot. They do expect us to carry our own weight, and we're not doing it, especially in Trump's era. It's very much a thing of, can you guys carry your own weight? That's what he's doing. And we're not carrying our own weight. We're not building what's necessary for them to recognize what we're doing.
And
you can't recognize something that doesn't exist.
This is what frustrates me, and I often go on about Morning Shot and Rob Hersoff's outfit and Biz News, is that they have a very large audience and they could be adding weight towards the movement. It's not us, it's the movement. But
they're not directly opposing it. They're not directly opposing the efforts of secessionists and stuff. So.
But they don't push it as much as it needs to be. If they just spoke about it more, and put it in people's minds more, it would really help. But it honestly just seems like there are 20 well, I don't know, 10 of us actually trying to move it in that direction, but we're so tiny.
Yeah. No, it's also, we could be doing more. I think, you listen to those sort of like grind set kind of, and a friend of mine sort of pressed this point home for me. It gives me a little section of interview. What's that Mukhu's name? Alex Hormes or something like that. But you were saying that, you think that the next guy is doing maybe twice as many sales as you. No, they're doing like 100 or 300 times as many sales as you. And so the idea of where the standard sits for what looks like real hard work and real input, is way higher than you think it is. And so I sit here, and when I've managed my time barely, poorly, I'll burn out at the end of the week or whatever. And, you think, okay, well, maybe I need, you rethink this and you think, well, maybe I need to be delegating more. Maybe I need to be cutting some of the work out and doing other things. Because frankly, the kind of stuff that needs to be put out is of a higher platform. It's of a much higher caliber. And we can't cry about the fact that we're not reaching it when we're not reaching it. We just have to reach it. So
sure, of course.
Yeah. Increase output, increase reach, delegate, recruit,
No, of course. No, sure, of course. That is a good point. But talking about Simonstown, this past week I went to go do a bit of a walk around and to see the state of some of the heritage buildings. And there are two in particular. There's one really old building called the Palace Barracks that was built in when was it? It was like the late 1785. And then on top of Simonstown, there's this whole compound. It's the old Royal Navy Sanatorium. It was a hospital that used to take care of sick people. And it was quite fascinating to see the decay that has occurred there. I mean, the buildings are a complete waste. They've been hollowed out. People have trashed it. The windows are broken. There's beer bottles. They've torn pieces out. And what's interesting, I found out, is that this decay has only really come about since about 2010. Both the Palace Barracks and the sanatorium were being used up until about 2010, 2012, which I thought is quite interesting, because we also know that from about 2012 is when the NDR was put on steroids. And it makes me see it. If you go there, it's quite a visible representation of the trajectory of Southern Africa, it looks like Zimbabwe. It genuinely does. Now, I'm not saying your mic's off. Okay, you speak. So now I'm not saying that South Africa is definitely going to go like Zim. I'm not saying that, but just the decay to the buildings that coincide with an increase in India from around 2012. I just thought it's quite a fascinating case study. So yes, there you can see some of the pictures there. They will come up on the screen. So that's the Palace Barracks, and it's just sort of an example of the current trajectory that we're on. That building there used to be magnificent. They used to hold functions there. You can see people have torn out. They've torn out plumbing. The second one's that is the sanatorium. So that's right above Simonstown, and that used to be a hospital for sick soldiers, and it was still used up until about 2010. So that decay has only come about the last 15 years. Well, let's say 10 years. Yeah. So, and if you scroll up, yeah. So it's just quite a eye-opening example of the current trends. Your mic's off if you want to say something, but I can see you have your child.
Yeah, so we're having a bit of sort of commotion here. What I was going to say is you were talking about when you were taking these photos and walking around these naval facilities. Yeah, Emma, that there was almost no security. Like nobody was looking at you and saying anything.
No, there's none at all. And I actually saw someone dressed in a SANDF uniform. So I'm assuming that he was from the SANDF. It wasn't a naval one. And he saw me wandering around. And when I saw him first, and so I just nonchalant, I don't suddenly start to run. I just continue to walk. He saw me, takes out his phone, he starts playing on his phone, totally just doesn't care at all. And I just realized also how weak the Navy and the military are, and that if a military power wanted to invade or wanted to take over, they would just blow us over. I mean, I was shocked by how nonchalant they were.
Yeah, I mean, I remember there were discussions recently. I mean, Joan Swart put this forward. Members of the security cluster put this forward, and Frans Cronje dealt with this as well. The concept of a national coup. Now, there's structural reasons why this is almost impossible. I mean, first of all, the three branches of the government are distributed across three different metropoles in the country. So you've got the executive in Pretoria, the judiciary in Bloemfontein, and the parliament is in Cape Town. So you've got all of these different branches are distributed, so you can't knock them all out at once. And additionally, you've got the question of, let's say you could do this, and you listen to Constant Viljoen's testimony from the early 90s where they say, yeah, sure, we could take it over, but then how would we govern it? What are we going to do? I mean, it's pointless. So I think, structural problems with South Africa dictate that it's actually, you're in a bad position if you have to govern this thing. Yes. But it occurs to me that regional coups are actually not that difficult. And let's say you wanted to take over KZN. Yeah, Emma. How much power would you actually have to? Wat sê jy nou? Is it? Okay. Well, you could take KZN, you could take the Cape, right? Provided you had an organized military capacity. It wouldn't be that hard. And then governing it would actually be reasonable. So this is the same counts for like local enclaves. You don't want to do this because you're now pressing a button that is very, very, spiky. But I think about this occasionally in the context of Cape Independence. I mean, you have a lot of people talking about, oh, the ANC won't let you do this, the ANC won't let you do that. And it occurs to me that, if push comes to shove and they say no to a referendum, the allegiance of the security forces is not on their side, and they're running the risk of just losing the entity outright. And it doesn't have to be a UDI or anything, but, physical control would be immediately lost.
Yes, no, sure. And I agree that people, and just on that point, like this guy I know, he managed to make a bit of extra income selling a book. So he wrote this book, sold it, made extra money, and it was popped into his bank account. I mean, someone I know automatically said to him, well, aren't you scared that SARS is going to find you? Now, I thought it was so interesting that the first thing that this person went to is fear, like fear of SARS finding him. I mean, SARS may find him, but it's pretty unlikely based on that he's just a random small fish and it's, 20,000 Rand. But what I found interesting is that there is a default within us to be scared of SARS or to be scared of the ANC, as if the ANC are standing on the other side of my wall and they're going to jump over. I'm like, come on. I mean, really? Are we that stupid? Or, I mean, I don't know why people are so scared of SARS and the ANC. I really don't understand it. Now,
I think they're scared for a reason, because SARS does have an enforcement problem.
Okay,
but
fine.
It's
but
not.
I mean,
they can still get you. You don't want to play games.
No. Look, I mean, I pay tax, so I'm not. It's someone I know. I pay my tax, but what I more found interesting is that fear is often the first thing that people jump to. So when you talk about Cape independence, fear jumps in. They'll be, oh, what about the ANC? Won't it ignite a civil war? And I think that is a bit of a foolish response because there are so many more factors to consider. And I think that a lot of these other forces are not as strong as what you think. And that we can actually get a lot more done without even being concerned about the consequences, because they're not going to happen. Such as me just walking into various areas. I just walked in and I walked out. No consequences. There's no one there. No one's doing anything. And it's that, but it's that kind of.
It makes me think of you remember that story from Silvermine from back in 2017 when a couple of Tikkoppers stole basically the whole radar dish and telecom system piece by piece over the course of 2 weeks, and they only found out that it had happened when they were trying to communicate with the last remaining frigate out in the ocean, and they couldn't. Sorry, my daughter's busy tearing a book. They found that they couldn't communicate with the frigate. And they're like, oh, why not? Turns out the satellite, the radar dish was gone. I mean,
yeah,
it's bananas.
No, totally. And I think we need more bold people with that attitude of, I'm going to start a business network. I'm going to start something. Like, I'm going to try and organize people and just do it. Like, who's going to stop you? Now, I don't advocate stealing.
The problem is the apathy. That's the biggest obstacle.
It's the apathy. People are so apathetic. And I mean, I'm not, and you're not, but like, how do we break the apathy and make people realize, actually, like, right now is the time for things. Like, when the state is weak, now is the time to act. Go and do something.
Yeah. On that note, I think it's time for us to go do something.
Anyways.
So I think we're going to ring off. We'll see everyone next week. Hopefully find time to do more streams during the week, even if it's just me. So yeah, we'll see everyone next week then.
Bye, everyone.
Cheers, David.
Bye, Rob. Cheers.